Hey everyone, I'm Mike Henry, and this is my Procreate demo for the piece I call Sittin' on the Steps. I'm continuing my theme of super inventive titles. So anyways, this I did a while ago. If you saw me post this on Instagram, it might have even been like a year ago, maybe not that long ago, but I did this sketch that you see like right away. I had this idea for just this dude sitting on the steps in like a city, and I just wanted to kind of bang that out, and I posted the rough sketch for it because that was when I was trying to get more roughs up on Instagram, and then I put it away and I didn't touch it again for a long time. I kept wanting to come back to it, but I just never did for whatever reason. So the first part of this video is drawn with the original fat pencil that I've talked about for years, which is just the technical pencil that's been adjusted. And then after all of these roughs are done, I actually switch to the new fat pencil. So you'll get to see sort of the way that handles. If you're interested in the new fat pencil, it's linked down below in the description. And if you would like to see how I had made the old fat pencil, that is linked in the new fat pencil description. So there's a chain of getting back to it. Now, it's based on an old version of Procreate, so I don't know how helpful that will be, that video anymore, but at least it's there in case you want to just sort of see what I did and how I got that original pencil. So at this point, it's still the original fat pencil. It is that way all the way until we get to the clean lines. So even though it's colorful and now we're getting some black lines thrown on here, these black lines were part of the original rough. I do different colored lines when I'm really trying to separate everything. You've seen other artists do similar things. There's really not a lot of logic behind it as far as like this color means this color means that. I'm sure there are systems, especially in like animation, where people do that on purpose. For me, it's literally just I change the color when it's something I need to keep track of. So in this case, it was like the rough sketch was in one color, then I throw the jacket on. Now let's change it to a different color before I do the jacket. Let's do the details of his face. Let's change the color so that I can keep all these things separate. That's all of the science behind it. I have a few other pieces that are part of the same loosely connected series that this one is a part of. If you go back through and you find like my video for one called Heterochromia, and then there's one called, honestly, I've actually already forgotten all the names of them, but recently on my Instagram page when I posted this final piece, I also put all of the other pieces in there. So if you go to my Instagram page, you'll be able to see all of the other ones. In fact, that is linked down below. I have a link in my description that's like find me everywhere, and it takes you to my Linktree page, which has like all the sites that I'm involved with in any way, shape, or form. So go there and you can find my Instagram, and then you can see all those other pieces. They're also in other things like my ArtStation and all that, but they just haven't been recently posted, so they're collected there. It's kind of nice to spot. I won't be posting them in the ArtStation link down below. I won't be posting all of them as a big grouping, so you'll have to find it via my recent Instagram post. So now we're zoomed in. This is the new fat pencil in action. The main differences with it, I demoed it in the video where I released it, but it's a little smoother. It lays a little heavier than the previous fat pencil did, and it's actually kind of just in general more comfortable to work with. I do sometimes, as I've mentioned before, I like brushes that fight me a little bit because you get some little happy accidents here or there, or it keeps you from laying something down too heavy to begin with. But in this case, I feel like when you're drawing and sketching, that type of a resistance isn't as desirable as when you're painting. And this new fat pencil, I think, alleviates some of those problems. There's been people who've said that the fat pencil that I used to use had too much of a grain to it. This one has less of a grain to it. So I think overall it's nice, and it is quite flexible. When you get really tight like this and you do what is essentially some inking with it, it can come out really thick and black, or whatever color you're using, but in this case black, and you can lay down something that's like really smooth and crisp like it is inked, but you can also open it up and get a very sketchy, softer feel with it, which you won't see in this video since it's based off of an older sketch, but in the next couple you'll be seeing me do some more loose stuff with it. In fact, I revisit the Ghostbusters series that I've been doing, where I did Egon like 2 years ago, and then I did Winston recently. I just drew Ray the other day, all with the new fat pencil, and then there's a couple of pieces after that that are done with the new fat pencil. So you'll get to see more action in the sketch realm with them soon. I want to address something that people have been requesting for a while now, which is more around anatomy and like sort of how-tos around anatomy. One of the reasons why I haven't done one of those videos is because I feel like there are just so many really good resources out there already on anatomy. But I realize that for people who enjoy my work or enjoy these videos, they want to see something that is a little bit from my perspective. Even if I do things wrong, which I surely will, you want to see it done by me, and I completely appreciate that. So I hope to do some of that stuff soon. When I do that, though, I don't like to just kind of lightly reference it in an already completed piece like I would do here, because I didn't draw this with that in mind, with sort of like educating around that topic in mind. So instead it'd just be me talking about what's already drawn here. By the way, here we've got a zoom in of a watch. I looked up some reference, and then here I am just quickly blocking it all in and drawing it all in. So this was just, I wanted to make sure that we captured the detail on the watch. It's small in the actual illustration, and I wanted it to be generic. I didn't want it to be overly unique. So that's just the story behind that watch and that zoom in on that watch there. So anyways, back to the anatomy thing. So I'll be doing a video where I talk about the way I do anatomy. I generally tend towards more expressive anatomy and things that aren't necessarily really accurate. Now, that doesn't mean that I'm not taking accuracy into account. You know what? Let's save it for the actual video when I get into it. I don't want to dip my toe into something and not be able to actually cover it properly. So that will be coming soon. I already have, I think it's 3 completed pieces after this one that won't be anatomy focused, but I'll try to insert one in there soon. I travel starting tomorrow, which means today when you're watching this, I'm already traveling because I'm recording this a day ahead of time. And I'll hopefully have some alone time when I'm not at work doing things at our site in London, and I may be able to actually put something together, because most of the time, as you know from when I was in Malta last year, when I'm alone in a hotel room, all I basically do is work on videos for you guys, because my kids aren't around screaming and making noise, so it's a lot easier for me to do that. So hopefully when I'm in London over the next couple of days, I will be able to get something done. We'll see. No promises. That's my plan, though. So as for the look and feel of this piece, oh, by the way, here I'm doing a trick with the glasses. I always do this with glasses because glasses are really hard for me for some reason, where I'm setting up a symmetry and I'm doing it flat like we're looking at it straight on, and then I'll position it on his face and I'll add any type of depth that I may have to add once it's on his face. There's not a lot that needs to be added here, but if it were more like a portrait, like a really close-up where you really see the dimension of those glasses, then I would do that. You can also see that I have the nose rests in there, but then I take them out. I just decided that the overall piece wasn't stylized to where I wanted to include all that hardware, so I just take them out. But anyways, the look and feel of this piece, if you go back through the other ones in this series, they're almost all line-driven. In fact, they are all... No, one of them is not line-driven. Maybe there's more, I don't know. They're mostly line driven, and the very, very first one that I did was the chick who has heterochromia, and she's wearing like a Letterman's jacket that has the little symbol on it. And so that was made deliberately to kind of look like an animation cell. Not 100% because there's more going on there than what you would usually do with animation, but that's what the spirit of it was. And so that spirit I put in a couple of them. There's also the one of the couple, and that one has like a slightly blurred, noisy background with then like cell looking art on top, and so that's what I want to do here, but I wanted to look at doing a slightly different background thing. So I'm using the perspective grid, however I set it up wrong when I first started on it, and I was like, and some of this you can also see me like experimenting with it, and that was me just sort of seeing what I wanted to do. And then as the piece goes on, I start experimenting with a different brush that I hadn't used before. It's called Stickman or Stickman. I mean, it's not like Stickman, like that old kid's book, but it's, I think it's Stickman. I don't know, whatever. That's what it's called, though. And you'll find it in the I think it's abstract section of the brushes. And the thing that I liked about it was that it's just a really weird shape and it forces you to do some weird stuff. And then it also has a lot of color change with the brush, and I just thought that'd be cool to capture like a sort of abstract, messy background thing. So at first what you see me using here is the new turpentine brush, but very quickly I decide that I don't even think this is the new turpentine brush because I don't know if I had developed that quite yet. Maybe that's what this is? Yeah, I think that is maybe what this is. The point here though isn't about identifying the exact brush. It was about the purpose of what I wanted to try and accomplish here. And what I wanted to try and accomplish was just this sort of like impressionist, abstract, rough background. And instead of doing what I did with the heterochromia piece where I did like this really mushy background and then blurred it because I wanted it to be in the distance, I decided to just keep everything sharp and play with it from there. So you'll see the perspective on this right now is totally whack, and we fix it in a second, just to give it like a slightly better feel, but that's, yeah, we'll sort it out. It'll get sorted out as I'm talking in the background. So now I think there, that brush that I was just toying with, yep, right there, you can see the Stickman, whatever it's called, brush. See right there, it's creating tons of crazy colors and shapes, and that's what it does. And that's actually what inspired me with my new turpentine brush to put in the color variation that's in there. If you've used that brush, maybe you've noticed it, maybe you haven't, because I wanted it to be really subtle, but when you brush with that at multiple strokes, it does create different colors when you do it. Not as intensely as this one does, but I liked the way this looked and I liked what it gave me overall. So you'll see me playing with it a lot. The way this background is built is deliberately messy. I didn't have a lot of logic going into my structure. He is very structured both in his drawing and his coloring and his shading, but the background here was just done sort of on the fly. So I blocked in everything that you see here, and then I created a new layer and I set it to multiply, and that's the shadows that I'm painting in right now. And that background right there, I'm toying with like what's going to happen there. These windows were just, I color picked the sky, painted in the windows. So that means that these buildings that are closest to our character are like solid paint, and then a multiply layer for some of those shadows, and then solid paint again for those windows. And now here's some more solid paint going on for like a reflected tree and reflected everything else, and then we lower the opacity on that. And so everything here was not done with as much of like a, here's the plan, I'm gonna go and execute the plan type thing. It was just done with like more of like a guerrilla style, like what am I gonna do here? Let's just do it kind of method, which for some people is probably their comfort zone. And for me, I don't really get freaked out about it, but I definitely in the middle of it, I'm just like, man, I wish that was on a different layer, or I wish I had done that, handled that differently, or whatever it is. The nice thing though is that this background, while it can look good, it's not the star of the show. He is the star of the show. So keeping it messy and keeping it not as perfect is sort of a hard exercise for me, but is ultimately a good idea. Now, something else that I did in this piece was I did more chromatic aberration. I tried a lot of different things though. I wanted to try and get a unique thing. There was a part of the chromatic aberration that I wanted to see if I could get away with like that Spider-Verse-y thing where like they're using chromatic aberration as part of their focal, like in order to have the blurred out shapes in the front or the blurred out shapes in the back, and then also have the chromatic aberration. I was just messing with stuff. So what I did, I'll talk about it now before we get to it because I'm sure it'll go by in the blink of an eye. I tried to section off everything that's in the back and have that aberrated in a different way, and then have that railing that's all the way in the front be aberrated in a different way. I don't know if aberrated is a word, but anyways, and then have everything else aberrated in a different way. We're getting highly technical today with these terms. And then have him be differently done so that way we're trying to capture these different depths. Now you can also see that I threw in some extra paint there just to give it some stylized edge to everything, and there's just a lot going on here to try and make that background have some energy and some roughness and some sort of a character, and then also have it be so completely in a different style so that when we've got this clean, sharp character in the foreground, mostly in the foreground, it definitely looks like two different things, like one thing is existing in a different world than the other. In a second, you're going to see me play with some of the aberration. Here you go right there. You can see all the colors flipping around, and I'm shifting them around, and I'm getting some interesting stuff happening. And then I turn it off or put it to the side or whatever, and I start working on the character. Now, one thing that was kind of hard about this piece for doing this video, I did not actually capture everything that I did, because at one point my file forked. I had created a piece that I created it and it went to a certain point, and then I forked it off, and I actually did some changes to the character and some other things, and then I tried to bring it all back together in the same file. So there is technically some aspects of this piece that didn't get captured, but if there are, they're super minor things. That's just kind of the nature of file management with Procreate. It captures things as they happen, and if you end up changing and doing different things and incorporating, like importing things in, then you get some changes. That's just sort of it. Now, how was this part of it done? It was done with the hard round brush that was in my brush set, which is almost identical to the hard round brush that's already in Procreate. So there's no fancy brush stuff happening here. I just paint and outline the section, and then I drag in to fill and then clean it up if there are weird edges. You can see that the colors that I ended up with are different than the colors that I have here. I knew that I wanted him to have dark jeans on, but I didn't know how loud I wanted the rest of his outfit to be. Did I want him to be like this bright green vest and then like an orange shirt, or did I want it more subdued like what you see here? So I was playing with a lot of things. I also duplicate the lines and slightly blur them. I also slightly colorize the lines, which I originally didn't intend to do, but I do decide to do that. Here you see me putting in the color variation, putting a little bit of 5 o'clock shadow on him, also getting a little bit of blush into his ears and a little bit into his nose and his hands, and then a little bit of darkening around the eyes, putting some texture into the jeans, not a lot, but just a little bit. We lowered the opacity on it too to sort of bring it back. Here's the color that I was going to go with for the longest time. I like the colors. I think they're loud and nice and interesting to look at, but it felt just kind of like weird, so we do eventually change that. Now I'm moving on to the shadows. The shadows are a gray. In fact, they're a black set to about 40%, I want to say. 40 or 45, maybe a little lower, but that's what I end up doing the direct shadows on. And so if you've been watching my videos where I do more painterly stuff and I do like the ambient occlusion pass, I don't do that here on this line, on this look and feel, because I'm trying to go for something that's not exactly, but something that's more animated looking. And then also by blurring those lines, we're going to get a little bit of an ambient occlusion vibe anyhow. So this is all just done by taking into account the direct lighting and where that shadow is going to fall. I still use the select paint, select clear method because it's the easiest way to move through the layers and have that one colorized layer on top, or excuse me, that one shadow layer on top. So if you want to really understand that select paint, select clear method, it is linked down below in the description. So go ahead and check that out. So right now this is just a black with a lowered opacity, and we're going through and we're painting it. We're using the big soft brush that was in my brush set, which is also similar to the airbrush in already in Procreate. That fur that's around the collar, I have to admit that's a custom brush that I made way back a year or so ago when I did the piece Aunt Becky. That's, in fact, go back, I'll link that below. I'm just linking everything now. I'll link the Aunt Becky piece below, and you can see how I did the brush for that, because I do describe it in that video. That's how I do that little fuzziness around his collar, which I then blur just to make it look like it's a little bit more in the same style as the rest of the shadows. Okay, we added a little bit of that glass shine onto his watch, but now we've turned all that off again so that we can worry about other details. Other details, like when I start doing the shadows for the fringes around his knee, I realized I did not put shadows on his knees, so I had to do that real quick. Okay, so now we've got the cast shadow off. We're turning that foreground layer back on again. I'm messing with some lighting things. I actually started to get a little fancy with the lighting, but it was like overdoing it, so I ended up killing it eventually. But you can see me playing with that and just trying to see like, okay, am I getting the look and feel that I want out of this? Try a couple of layer settings, adjust some things, adjust some colors. Here's where I colorize the lines. I do slightly colorize the shadow, which you can see there as well. Now we're into the palette that we end on, which is more of a serious palette, less audacious, but still just kind of nice. I feel like it fits his character a little bit better. We also put some reflections on his glasses. We've got the reflection from the sky. We've got the reflection of like his fur and skin around him. Actually, it's more just the cement. You can see there's a slight rim light happening. It's catching the bottom of his glasses. It's also catching like his pants and his sleeves and his fingers a little bit, just kind of capturing a little bit of that cement bounce as soft as we can. Here I'm adjusting some of the fur. There were aspects of it that annoyed me. It wasn't really anything noticeable, but it annoyed me, and it's really minute. You can tell it's minute because you can barely see what I'm doing there, but just wanted to call that out since it seemed like I wasn't doing anything for a second. That's what this is too. I'm adjusting the shadows now on the part of the fur that I added. And in the middle of doing it, I was like, this is crazy. Nobody's going to notice this, and I move on. Draw the symbol onto his vest. That ties him in now to the other ones, these sort of like fashion illustrations that have that symbol in there. I put some darkening in the bottom right now to emphasize the closeness that that part of the illustration has to us. And now we start working on trying to bring this background home a bit. You can see here now that I've cut out the background. I just did the chromatic aberration pass on it. I made it really strong. Now we're doing the midground, and I made it less strong there. And then I try to solve this railing. Now, I'll admit to not knowing enough about all of the rules of chromatic aberration. You can see this railing is going to go berserk for a bit here, because as I was trying to figure out a way to just get it to aberrate more than anything else, the fact that it's like its own layers on top of everything, it actually made that a giant pain in the ass. I'm guessing it's not pulling all of the channels, and it's getting really weird. So it was just, that part's a little strange, I'll admit. Then we throw a noise filter on the entire thing. That was just done by filling in white, and the other I am toggling to check things. To do the noise, I filled it all in white, applied the noise, set the noise to multiply, and then lowered that layer down really low in opacity. And now I'm just adding in some extra details, getting some shine in his hair, first and foremost. This, I believe, was my detail pass that I started doing. I added a little bit of extra bounce on his hair, some details in the background, just some like really small stuff that mattered to me, but it was just really minor. And then here is the final version of the illustration. So many of these illustrations sort of end with a whimper because they are lots of little small tweaks, and then it finally gets to where the artist, in this case me, is like, okay, fine, I can live with this, and then we move on. But yeah, this is more or less it. It was really fun to do. It was nice to bring it out of the on hold folder that I have full of stuff and actually bring it into reality. So thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please consider liking and subscribing and all that stuff. I really appreciate it, and I'll see you on the next one. And if you're looking for me on the internet, these are the places where you can find me.